How's it going, guys? It is April 7th, 9:42 a.m. A little bit earlier than I normally do my vlogs, but got a bunch of stuff to do today, trying to knock it out early before I go to work. So today's vlog is going to be on working harder than your competition. So there's a lot that goes into that. Mostly, it's on an individual level. So performing and I'd like to use the I guess you could use it both in the educational and the workplace platforms. In the workplace is probably most commonplace, and in the military I found it pretty useful there. And I never used to be competitive before joining the military. I was very anti-competitive. So when I did join the military, I learned to be competitive to a way that would benefit me. And what I mean by that is I would use my peers to use that as a gauge of normalcy, right? Even if I had high performing peers, I would use that as a gauge of normalcy. And then I competed with them and tried to compete against myself for excellence, not perfectness. They say if you strive for being perfect, that you'll land among the excellent. So I use that theory a lot. So I try to strive for perfection, and then I end up landing in excellence, which I'm perfectly fine with. So working harder than your competition. There was a lot of things in the military where I would try to do that, and it ended up being super successful for me, especially when I first got in. I noticed there was only a couple things that you could really excel at, and one of them was physical fitness. And I remember when I started, I wasn't really maxing out the PT test. There was a 2-mile run, push-ups and sit-ups. When I first started basic training, I was probably average with everybody else as to what I could do. But I had a personal goal that by the time I left there, I would reach perfection on their scale for my age group and me being a male. In other words, I had to run my 2 miles in, I don't know, I think it was 13 minutes or high 12s. So a little around 6.5 minute miles. I know I had to do more than probably around 80 push-ups in 2 minutes, and then probably around 80 sit-ups in 2 minutes. And like I said, when I first started, I was average, and then by the time I graduated basic training, I did hit that 300 mark, and I was pretty excited about that. But I remember competing, pushing myself and working harder. Even though she was a female, she just ran so fast, and I couldn't keep up with her the first the basic training was 9 weeks. I couldn't keep up with her probably the first 6 or 7 weeks. But by week 7 or 8, when I had like a week or 2 left of basic training left, I finally caught her. And then on the last week, I remember I passed her. And she was my standard because she ran so fast that I figured if I could run as fast as her, then I could probably be doing some good things with my run time. So I used it as leverage. I used her as my competition, and I decided to work harder than her when it came to that. I also noticed this in another aspect of the workplace where I've heard some stories people tell, especially working in a bar setting. You hear a lot of stories, but a lot of managers sometimes will use opposing forces or two of their employees who are in like positions to compete against each other for, let's say, a raise, or let's say a new upcoming position. That happens a lot in the corporate world where somebody at a higher echelon will be moving on out or moving on up or retiring, and then there's a new hole to fill, and then everybody in the level below is competing to get that hole filled. So I noticed that there'll be a lot of internal competition, a lot of people stepping on each other to get to that position. To caveat onto this talk, it is not good to ever do this at the cost of somebody else. So you should be doing it in a competitive way to help out yourself. You shouldn't be doing it to hinder anybody else. You shouldn't you should do it in a way to where your work speaks for itself, not in a demeaning way where you're trying to trash somebody else's work. And that's just a caveat on that. But I notice in the corporate setting that a lot of times this does happen, and it really is, they like to step on each other in order to get ahead. When I was exiting out of the military, I noticed a lot of that, and it just wasn't the brotherhood that I had joined initially, where everybody was helping each other out to get to where they needed to go. I did meet some adversity early on, but I ended up working through that. And but I noticed as towards the downsizing and everything that was going on with the downsizing, a lot of people were getting afraid. A lot of people started to tell on each other, and it reminded me of high school towards the end, where people were just nitpicking the smallest things because everybody was afraid that they were going to be next on the chopping block. I mean, fortunately for me, I wasn't a victim of that chopping block. I left kind of on my own terms and due to some injuries. But I noticed that it just wasn't the original organization that I joined, and I didn't really like that anymore. And I was kind of glad to be leaving on my own terms. But I did notice that in those types of settings, people tend to compete with each other. And if you do it in a positive way, you really uplift everybody around you. And that's what this vlog is about, is, competing with, working harder than your competition, competing with them, and you doing the individual work, not trying to make it seem like somebody else is not doing the work that they need to be doing. That is very counterproductive, and all it causes is hostility in the workplace. And I've been exposed to that type of environment, and it's never healthy. It just makes for awkwardness, and it doesn't make for it doesn't contribute to the overall success of that team. If you individually strive and put forth your best effort every single day, people will notice. Even if it takes time, people will notice. But if you're the type of person to be lackadaisical and just kind of go along with work, not really put any extra effort in, you'll be noticed for that as well. But if you decide to change your mind and you come in and you got a little bit more pep in your step, people notice that. I talk to the other owners at where I work, and sometimes we'll talk about other people who work there, and just what I'm learning in the work environment, especially in the management position, is people can seem so promising. They can seem like they have a future with our particular company or business, and excuse me. And when it comes down to it, only longevity will prove that. People can seem so perfect and do so perfect this week. Excuse me. And everybody always puts on a good show in the beginning, but really longevity is going to be the key when it comes to having good people work for you. I noticed that the best employees stick around for a long time, and it's a reflection in management too. If you can get employees to stick around for a long time, if you have a high turnover rate within your business or company, that's not a good sign. Obviously, there's something wrong there, and people don't like working there. So it's something to check within themselves. But I never get too excited whenever we bring somebody new on board, because you just don't know how they're going to work out. You can only know that the shoe fits right after it's been worn for some time, is a good analogy I like to use. So back to working harder than your competition, you got to make sure that you're doing everything individually possible to outwork them. And then once you get to a level of let's say you're at the top of your game, try to outwork yourself. Try to set new goals and new parameters so you can stay on top. I can't tell you, and I've said this before, how many successful people who are on top of their game, who are on top of their industry for their particular industry, and you don't know the amount of effort that they put into it consistently on a daily basis. Not only that, to stay on, to get to the top. And it's the ones who, once they're happy with being on top, they kind of slow down and then they get replaced after time. But the ones who stay on top for years and years and years are constantly developing new ideas and working tirelessly. They have that same frame of mind that they are not on the top, that they are still at the bottom. And if you if you maintain that frame of mind, you will always outwork your competition. Even when you get to the top, think you're at the bottom, because those people at the bottom are egging to take your place, and they're just waiting for you to slip up, for you to mess up. So if you have that mentality as to where you're always on, on the bottom, trying to climb your way up this corporate ladder or whatever ladder you're trying to climb in life, and you really have that mindset, even when you get to the top, maintain that mindset, and you will stay on top for years to come. And so it's one of those secrets that it makes perfect sense when you hear it, but in the application in the real world, it's much harder said than, or it's much easier said than done. And you just have to put forth that constant effort and compete against your peers. Once your peers are no longer competition worthy, and you are at the top, start competing against yourself, and never lose that mind frame, and never get comfortable where you're at. Always be constantly improving, and you'll see that you will constantly stay ahead. And you have to be willing to adapt and go with the changes as things progress for you. So that'll be it for today's vlog. There was a lot of good information in there. Make sure that you guys leave me some comments. Let me know what you think about it. I appreciate you guys watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. I have a goal of 75 subscribers for the end of this month. I'm still stuck at 59. For some reason, 59 is being giving me a little bit of trouble as far as getting to 60. But I know that I will get there by the end of the month. I have no doubt that I will. And I'm putting forth the effort to make that happen. But again, I appreciate everybody who's paying attention to these videos, watching them, leaving me comments. And I will see you guys on the next one.